Life can be unpredictable, full of change. Some good, some not so good, and some complicated. But one thing is constant. One thing never changes.
As a student, you're used to change. You change classes all the time. You probably have different teachers this year than you did last year or last semester. You see people graduate every year and new kids show up at school. You've seen your body change, your friend groups change, and your view on certain things change. And let's just be honest, there are some certain things that are true about change. Some change is awesome. When the change is something that you want, you like it. If you ride the bench on your team and then your coach finally decides to move you up to the starting lineup, that's a good change. If you've been single a while and the girl that you're interested in finally decides to go out with you, that's a change that you approve of, right? If you change hairstyles and you love the end result, that's a change that you can get behind. But it doesn't always work like that. Not all change feels like good change. Some change is awful. When the change is difficult, you don't like it. When a close friend moves away or switches schools, that's not fun. When you go through a breakup, that's not a cool change. When your family breaks apart, it's hard to embrace that kind of change. And when you change hairstyles and it doesn't work out, that is nobody's favorite kind of change. It makes you so uncomfortable. Like it or not, change happens. Change is inevitable. It's a part of life, especially in school. There's no guarantee that the way things were before will stay the same. In fact, the guarantee is the opposite, that the way things were before will definitely not stay the same because change happens. You can't escape it or run away from it or make it go away. Lastly, when it comes to change, everyone is affected. Let me give you an example. A big life-altering change is if your parents get divorced. Now, obviously that's a big change for them, but it affects you too in a major way. The same is true if a teacher or a coach switches schools. If a friend moves away, that's a huge change for them, but there is an effect that has an impact on more than just them. When the after is different than the before, it has a way of affecting everyone, not just the people who are directly involved. And as uncomfortable as change is, here's the good news. We're going to talk about something today that has the potential to be a game changer for us when it comes to the way that we view change. People have been struggling with how to handle change forever. When you open up the pages of the Bible and read from the writers God used to tell his story, you'll see that they too struggled with the idea of change. They went through a lot of the same stuff that we go through. Loss, broken relationships, heartbreak, uncertainty, insecurity, and so much more. And many of them wrestled with the question of how they could trust God when their lives seemed to be in a constant series of unwanted and unexpected changes. Sound familiar? But over and over again, the writers in the Bible who were dealing with so much change kept coming back to the same truth. And while many of them had a lot of helpful things to say about dealing with change, we're going to look at what the author of the book of Hebrews said. Hebrews is a letter written to Christians who were learning how to follow Jesus in their Jewish way of living the world. This is important to know because a lot of people think that the letter was written to Jewish Christians living in Jerusalem who were facing persecution, which means that they were treated with hostility and threatened to be killed for their religious beliefs. In fact, the persecution was so bad some of the Jewish Christians were thinking of converting back to the Jewish religion so that they wouldn't be persecuted. And because of that, much of the book is focused on Jesus and who he is and how following him was not just a good idea, but the best idea. We are going to pick up in the last chapter where the author is wrapping up this letter with this incredible offer of hope to those reading, even with all the change that they were facing. Hebrews 13:8 says this, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. To put it even more plainly, Jesus never changes. He's always the same. However he was before, loving and kind, cheering for you, generous, that's how he's going to be after. And in a world marked by constant change, good change and bad change, I think that's great news because that means that God doesn't change even if everything else around us does. When everything around us feels inconsistent, Jesus isn't. When everyone around us seems different or like they can't understand, Jesus does. So why is that so important? Let me explain it to you this way. Have you ever seen a huge tree? Maybe you have one in your backyard right now, or you've seen one in the park or on TV. I'm talking about one of those really huge sturdy trees with tons of branches and leaves. What is it that keeps the tree in the ground? The tree is secured into the ground and holds steady in place because of its roots. So every season when the weather changes, when the wind blows, the ice comes, the rain falls, the sun beams down, the fog covers, the drought hits, the tree isn't moved. With all that change happening around it, it would be easy to think that the tree would just fall down and give up, but it doesn't. It's rooted in place no matter what change is happening around it. And that's what an unchanging God does for us. He keeps us rooted. When we focus on Him, the one who never changes, we're able to stay steady and secure like a tree that's unshakable and unbreakable, even when everything around us feels unsteady and insecure. God doesn't change when everything else does. Because everything changes, but some things never change. That's God. When we're rooted in God and we're experiencing change, it doesn't mean that we're all of a sudden happy with every difficult circumstance that change can bring. But instead, it looks like knowing the truth that God's commitment to you never changes and experiencing difficulty and disappointment at the same time. We can know that God's love and purpose and presence doesn't change, and He never changes. No matter what happens in our life, no matter what change we're facing, we can count on the one who never changes. We can be rooted in God when nothing else feels stable because God is. And when we trust in God that never changes, whatever difficult change comes our way, there is peace that we can experience anyways. Here's a simple phrase that I'd love for you to remember. God doesn't change even if. He's the solid, unmovable ground on which we can stand and build our lives. And that's why no matter what change is happening around us, we can remain secure when our eyes are fixed on Him. It was true back then when the writer of Hebrews said it, and it's true today. But what does that mean for you? It means even if things are unpredictable or out of control, God's ability to hold the whole world never changes. Even if things will never be the same because of death or permanent injury or chronic health issues, God's availability to hear your prayers never changes. Even if what lies ahead is exciting because you made the team or aced the driving test, the amount of God's love for you never changes. Even if what lies ahead is new territory, changing schools or graduating or starting a new job, God's promise to be with you through it all never changes. Even if what lies ahead is scary, God's reliability to steady you never changes. And on top of all of that, you can keep in mind that the one thing about God that never changes is that He loves you no matter what change you're facing. He will always love you and always care for you. He's with you when things are going steady and well, and He's with you when things change and everything in between. So the next time you experience change in your life, and you certainly will, you don't have to be uprooted by insecurity or fear or frustration. Instead, you can remain steady and stable, rooted in an unchanging God. To help you do that, I want you to try one thing. I want you to remember a time that God was faithful to you in the past. And I want you to remember a time that you felt God's love in your life and a time when you saw God's goodness. Maybe it was coming to this church and finding your small group. Maybe it was at camp. Maybe it was when your mom was really sick and a whole bunch of people supported you by making your family meals and helped out in a million little ways. Maybe it was when your dad lost his job, and even though it was really scary, you grew closer as a family. Remember those things in your life and write a few of them down. And then remember that the same God who was there when those things happened is the same God who's with you now. And if God was faithful or committed to you in that circumstance or season of your life before, then you can stay rooted in the belief that He will be faithful again and again. For those of you who aren't sure what you believe about God or don't know if you've seen Him be faithful, that's okay. For those of you who are in the middle of some difficult change where it's hard to even imagine God being faithful to you in the middle of it, that's okay. All of us have been there at some point. Just think about a time in your life when something really good happened. Write it down and remember it. I know that there are plenty of examples of how God has come through for you and for the people around you. So use the other stories from other people as a starting point to consider the fact that God is working in and around your life too. Wouldn't it be nice to have something unchangeable that you could focus on and trust even when things around you changed? Wouldn't it give you confidence knowing that no matter how unstable things felt in your life, you have an unshakable rock who always loves you and never changes? God doesn't change, even if. That's an incredible thing to remember. He was the same before, and He'll be the same after. As we head to group, remember this one thing, that we want to encourage each other, that we want to help each other see that when nothing else feels secure, that we can stay rooted in God because God never changes.